It's been a bit of a shock. However much one tries to prepare oneself for something like this, it's still a dreadful shock, and we're still trying to come to terms with that. And it's very, very sad. But I have to say that
For decades, one thing was rarely questioned when someone becomes monarch. Does he have the power to decide the fate of all royal property titles and legacies? That's also what many believe King Charles III considered after his succession. As head of the monarchy, he could reshape the structure of the monarchy, according to his vision, from reviewing estates and adjusting the use of royal residences to reconsidering assets associated with family members. But then on March 25th, 2026, everything changed. Not by a parliamentary vote, not by a court ruling, and not by opposition from Prince William or Prince Harry. The one who brought the entire plan to a halt was his younger brother, who had always quietly remained outside the controversy, Prince Edward, Duke of Edinburgh. He didn't appear on television to refute the accusations. He didn't hold a press conference. He didn't attack anyone. Instead, Edward confronted something far more powerful than mere arguments, contracts signed years earlier, financial records, investment documents, legal papers, and documents bearing the signature of Queen Elizabeth II. These documents not only questioned the monarch's control, but also opened a profound confrontation between current power and the final will of the previous monarch. Today, we will follow the entire unfolding of events step by step to discover why a man known for his reticence could become a figure who caused the entire royal family to pause and reconsider everything. And if you enjoy in-depth analyses of the British royal family dramatic behind-the-scenes events and stories of power tradition and royal heritage, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next episodes. And as always, where are you following this story from? Leave a comment below. You know we won't miss any comments. And to understand why Prince Edward was able to stand firm in this confrontation.
Do you think a lot of that respect has ebbed away in recent years?
As I said earlier on, that it was a completely different era.
We need to go back to the time before Queen Elizabeth II's death in September 2022. In her final years, the Queen thought not only about the present of the royal family. She also thought about what would happen after she was no longer there to protect those she trusted. One of the most important decisions concerned her youngest son, Prince Edward. For Elizabeth, the title of Duke of Edinburgh was never just a ceremonial title. It was a title that had been associated with Prince Philip for over 70 years. It represented service, discipline, loyalty, and the entire life Philip had dedicated to the monarchy. So when thinking about his successor, Elizabeth looked to Edward. He wasn't the most boisterous member of the family, nor was he a frequent presence in the media spotlight. But it was precisely that stability, discretion, and perseverance that made him the right choice. Elizabeth wanted Edward to receive the title of Duke of Edinburgh. But more importantly, she wanted the title to have a real foundation behind it. A great title would be empty without a place to represent that role, a home, a symbol, a lasting anchor for the Edinburgh family. And that foundation was Bagshot Park. And from that very point, Bagshot Park became the true center of the entire confrontation. For Bagshot Park was not simply a beautiful mansion located within Windsor Great Park. It was part of the image, status, and significance associated with the Duke of Edinburgh. If Edward only retained the title, but lost the place that represented it, the title would be like an empty shell. It had a name but no foundation. Edward's story with Bagshot Park began in 1998, when he signed a lease agreement. But the important thing is that Edward didn't step into a perfect, luxurious palace ready to enjoy. On the contrary, Bagshot Park was then severely dilapidated, old, and in need of a huge investment to become a permanent residence. According to the details mentioned, The initial rent was only about £5,000 per year. But that figure came with a huge responsibility Edward had to take charge of restoring, repairing, and maintaining the mansion himself. He spent approximately £1.36 million of his own money on the renovations, while the total cost of the renovations was said to be close to £3 million. After the work was completed, his rent was adjusted to market rates. This makes a big difference. Edward didn't just receive a royal privilege. He made a real investment in the property. He transformed a dilapidated property into his family home. And so, when Bagshot Park came under review, Edward didn't see it as a mere administrative inspection. To him, it was the risk of losing something he had invested his money, time, and loyalty in for years. And it was from that investment that Edward understood that if he wanted to protect Bagshot Park, he couldn't rely solely on family ties or palace promises. In 2007, he took another crucial step, renewing the lease on Bagshot Park for 150 years. This wasn't a random decision. It was a long-term, quiet, but extremely solid preparation. Edward understood one thing very well. In the royal family, promises can change over time. The person who once defended a decision may no longer be there. A new generation can rise and see things differently. What is considered a commitment today may be called a need for review tomorrow. Therefore, Edward chose the only thing that could withstand multiple reigns' paperwork. Contracts, terms, financial records, investment documents all became the silent protection surrounding Bagshot Park. That's also what makes Edward's character in this story so special. He wasn't a media sensation. He didn't go out and boast about his sacrifices. Nor did he turn family disagreements into a public battle. But he was always prepared. He kept every file. He understood the value of every signature. And perhaps deep down, Edward always knew that one day those documents would no longer be just old papers in a drawer. They would become the final shield, protecting his family home. And then what Edward had been quietly preparing finally became necessary. After Queen Elizabeth II's death in September 2022, King Charles III ascended the throne with a very clear vision. The monarchy had to be leaner, more economical, and more tightly controlled. On the surface, it was a reasonable idea. A modern monarchy couldn't function exactly as it had decades before. Charles wanted fewer members in the inner circle, fewer expenses, fewer questioned privileges, and more control at the center of the palace's power. From there, the reviews began. Property reviews, residence reviews, registration reviews, reviews of what had once been considered family agreements. And then Bagshot Park's name appeared on the list. To Charles, Bagshot Park might have been just a large property to be considered in a modernization plan. A large, high-value estate associated with expense and public image. But to Edward, it was never just a line on a report. It was a place he had personally funded renovations. It was where Sophie built her family. It was the home of James and Lady Louise. It was the true foundation behind the Duke of Edinburgh. To Queen Elizabeth II, Bagshot Park was a promise. To Prince Philip, it was a legacy. And from the moment Charles saw it as property, and Edward as a home, the real conflict began. And precisely because Bagshot Park holds such great significance, the moment Prince Edward officially receives the title of Duke of Edinburgh in April 2023 should have been a perfect milestone. It was the moment a long-held promise was finally fulfilled. The title, which had been associated with Prince Philip for over 7 decades, was now passed to his youngest son, who had quietly served, kept a distance from scandal, and consistently maintained a stable image for the royal family. On the surface, it was a beautiful gesture from King Charles III, an older brother handing over his father's legacy to his younger brother, a king fulfilling his mother's wish. But behind that solemn moment lay a profound paradox. Because just a few years later, the very system that bestowed the title upon Edward began to question the most important element that gave it its meaning, Bagshot Park. Edward had waited almost his entire life to step into the role that had once belonged to his father. But once he assumed that role, he had not only to represent Philip's legacy, he also had to protect its very foundations. For a title cannot stand alone if everything connected to it is detached from its holder. And for Edward, keeping Bagshot Park was no longer a matter of privilege. It was a battle to retain the true meaning of the title he had waited so long for. But before the conflict around Bagshot Park had even subsided, another problem arose, this time, not at a mansion, but in the jewelry box of Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh. An official from Queen Camilla's office was sent to inspect the jewelry. On paper, this was called a jewelry audit, a routine review to determine the origin and ownership of items associated with the royal family. But for Edward and Sophie, it was far more complex, for the focus of the inspection was the Anthem tiara. This wasn't a piece of jewelry Sophie borrowed for an event. This was the tiara associated with her wedding in 1999, a gift from Queen Elizabeth II upon her entry into the royal family. To outsiders, it might just be the diamond, the antique design, and its historical value. But to Sophie, it was a memento of her marriage. It was a memento of a momentous occasion. It was a gift from the woman she considered her second mother. What made it even more poignant was the moment Sophie called Queen Elizabeth II Mama at an event. A very short word, but enough to show that the connection was not just a matter of royal protocol. Therefore, when the Anthem tiara came under scrutiny, it was no longer just about jewelry. It became a question of memory, family affection, and the right to keep the last thing the Queen had given Sophie. And it is from here that the controversy begins to escalate to a whole new level. The argument is quite clear. Because the Anthem tiara was crafted with details originating from the time of Queen Victoria, the piece of jewelry could be considered part of the royal estate rather than personal property. If that interpretation is accepted, the tiara would no longer be Sophie's private property. Instead, it would be managed as a royal artifact and could only be used with the approval of the competent authority. This means Sophie might have to ask permission every time she wants to wear the very wedding gift she has preserved for so many years. But what worries Edward's side even more is not just the tiara. If this argument is accepted, it would create a completely new precedent. Any personal gift previously given by monarchs could be reviewed under the same principle. At that point, the sphere of influence would no longer be limited to Sophie or the Edinburgh family. Ironically, Queen Camilla herself owns many pieces of jewelry of royal origin. If the same standards are applied to everyone, this argument could ultimately backfire on those who put it first. And that's when Prince Edward completely changed the pace of the confrontation. He didn't get angry in public. He didn't make harsh statements. Nor did he turn the family matter into a media war. Edward chose the approach he had prepared for years, bringing in lawyers and letting the documents speak for themselves. Each document was presented in a very clear order. First, the contract relating to Bagshot Park, showing that Edward's right to reside and control was not a temporary privilege. Next was evidence of the money he personally spent repairing, maintaining, and transforming the estate into a true family home. Then came the maintenance records spanning many years, proving that Edward not only benefited from the royal family, but also bore significant financial responsibility for protecting the property. But the most significant part lies in the documents connected to Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip, the will, the witness documents, and the deed of gift, confirming that Anthem tiara was a personal gift for Sophie. From that moment, Edward was no longer in the position of a younger brother asking to keep what he cherished. He stood in the position of someone with the legal right to keep them. And the confrontation from here on was no longer just a family emotion. It became a real legal battle. And when all the legal documents were laid out, everything finally converged on March 25th, 2026. That was the day the confrontation would transcend the boundaries of an internal review. Edward issued a clear warning: if the request concerning Anthem Tiara was not withdrawn, his side might release Queen Elizabeth II's private letters. The weight of those letters lay not only in their defense of Sophie's ownership rights. More dangerously, they could reveal how the Queen truly viewed Queen Camilla over the years. And that was something King Charles could not take lightly, because Charles had spent years rebuilding Camilla's public image. From a once controversial figure, she had been elevated to the position of Queen Consort, then to a central part of the new dynasty's image. If those letters surfaced, all that effort could be reversed. From this moment on, the confrontation was no longer about a tiara or a mansion. It became a battle of honor, about Queen Elizabeth II's legacy, about Camilla's public image, and above all, about the true limits of a monarch's power. Just as the confrontation threatened to spiral out of control, Princess Anne entered. She met with King Charles privately in a closed room, but Anne's appearance wasn't meant to be a conciliatory gesture. She wasn't there to diffuse the situation. She was there to remind Charles that this matter was far more significant than Edward's Sophie or a piece of jewelry. For Anne, it was about their mother's promise. It was about the value of Queen Elizabeth II's signature, and it was about the very foundations of the monarchy. Anne's message was clear: if Queen Elizabeth II's signature on a document could be ignored today, King Charles's signature could be questioned tomorrow. It was a warning that struck directly at the core of Charles's power. A king cannot break the promises of a previous monarch and still expect absolute faith in his own. For royal power doesn't just come from the current throne. It was also built on continuity, tradition, and faith in what previous monarchs had left behind. Anne didn't stop at a moral warning either. She made it clear that if the pressure continued on Edward and Sophie, she was prepared to demand a full audit of all expenses, personnel, and allocations related to Queen Camilla's office. From that moment, Charles understood that Edward was no longer alone. When Anne raised the issue at a principled level, the confrontation was no longer limited to Edward and Sophie. It began to affect the next generation of the Edinburgh family, James the Earl of Wessex and Lady Louise Windsor. This is what made Anne even more resolute. According to reports, there was pressure to push James and Louise into private life, sooner separating them from their protected position within the royal structure, before their family was truly ready. To outsiders, this might just be part of a plan to streamline the royal family. But for Anne, the difference lay in one-word choice. She understood very well what life outside the center of the royal family was like. Anne herself had chosen for her children, Peter Phillips and Zara Tyndall, not to bear traditional royal titles. She knew it could bring freedom, privacy, and a less constrained life. But it was her decision. No one forced Anne to do this. No one used palace pressure to force Peter and Zara to leave their positions before the appropriate time. But with James and Louise, Anne saw things differently. This wasn't a natural choice parents make for their children. It was external pressure, a way to narrow the Edinburgh family's sphere of influence and make them more dependent on decisions from the center of power. That made Anne unable to remain silent. For her, if Edward and Sophie had the right to protect their home, their mementos, and their heritage, then they should also have the right to decide their own children's future. From the moment James and Louise were drawn into it, this conflict was no longer just a matter of the past. It became a question of the future, and as the conflict reached the next generation, Charles was forced to confront the most crucial element, the legal documentation. His lawyers examined every document Edward presented. No longer were family sentiments the issue. no longer were reminders of the past. Everything was viewed through the lens of contract's ownership, binding clauses, and the legal value of each signature. The final conclusion left Charles with few options. Prince Edward's position was virtually unbreakable. Bagshot Park was protected by a long-term contract, backed by a clear investment history, private funds invested, and years of property maintenance. It wasn't a residence that could be reclaimed by a simple internal decision. An Anthem tiara was not easily brought back under central control either. The deed of gift confirmed it was a personal gift to Sophie, not property on loan, not a temporary artifact, and not something that could be reclassified simply because the political circumstances in the palace changed. But what weighed on the whole affair wasn't just the law. It was the shadow of Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip. Elizabeth's will, along with Philip's witness and support, transformed this dispute into a moral and symbolic issue. If Charles tried to overcome those documents, he wouldn't just be up against Edward. He would be up against his parents' legacy. And that was the moment Charles had to realize a very difficult truth. Being king didn't mean he could reverse everything. There were signatures made before he ascended the throne. There were promises made before he took power. And there were limits that even the crown couldn't cross. When Charles realized that even the crown couldn't overcome those documents, the palace had only one option: retreat. Late on March 25, 2026, an official memo arrived for Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh. The text wasn't long. There were no soft explanations, no public acknowledgement of a confrontation behind palace doors, and no apology to Sophie. But its content was clear enough. The Anthem tiara would remain under Sophie's sole control. Just one sentence, but it ended all argument that the tiara could be returned to central custody. The wedding gift Sophie had cherished for years remained hers. The memento from Queen Elizabeth II wasn't taken, and the family memory associated with it remained protected. At the same time, the search of Bagshot Park was quietly halted. There was no grand announcement, no press conference. No one stood up to declare Prince Edward victorious. But inside the palace, no one misunderstood what had just happened. Edward had won. Sophie kept her tiara. Edward kept Bagshot Park. And most importantly, what Queen Elizabeth II had laid down before leaving this world stood firm. It wasn't just a victory of wealth. It was a victory of preparation, of paperwork, of patience, and of a man who had remained silent long enough that when he needed to speak, he didn't need to say much. Just provide the evidence. And that is why this victory brought no peace. Legally, Prince Edward retained everything that mattered most. He kept Bagshot Park. Sophie kept Anthem tiara. Documents relating to Queen Elizabeth II remained valid. And all attempts to bring the Edinburgh family back under central control had to stop. But one thing changed forever. That was the trust between the two brothers. From now on, the public may still see King Charles and Prince Edward standing side by side at royal events. They may still smile for the cameras. They may still appear together at solemn ceremonies. They may still project the image of a united, stable family that prioritizes duty over personal disagreements. But internally, things are no longer the same. Edward will never forget that there was a time when he had to rely on lawyers' contracts, private letters, and his mother's signature to protect his family home from the very system headed by his brother. And Charles will never forget that even while wearing the crown, there were limits he could not cross. He was still king. Edward was still Duke of Edinburgh. Sophie still kept the tiara given to her. Bagshot Park still belonged to the Edinburgh family as it was established. But after all, this victory left a very deep crack. A crack that didn't appear in press releases, wasn't mentioned in official photographs, couldn't be seen through public smiles. It only existed in the silence among those who were once family. And sometimes in the royal family, the most dangerous thing isn't an open war. It's a moment when people still stand side by side, but no longer truly trust each other. If you found this story compelling, please leave a comment. Do you think Prince Edward was right to use legal documents to protect his family? Or did it create an irreparable rift within the royal family? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to continue following more dramatic royal analyses in future videos. This video is intended for entertainment and commentary purposes only. Some details may be based on public reports, personal opinions, online discussions, speculation, or dramatized elements. Nothing in this video should be understood as verified fact, unless clearly stated. Viewers are encouraged to use their own judgment and watch responsibly. Royal Palace Corridor shares royal stories and discussions for entertainment and audience enjoyment.